So, over the last few years, my mental health has been rapidly improving, and the wisdom that I've been collecting just through the mental work that I've been doing, the physical work that I've been doing, the therapy that I've been going through has all just begun to compound on itself. I was realizing that a lot of the things that I was learning, I think other people could also apply and find very useful for themselves. And specifically, the work that I was doing in my head was mostly revolved around improving the mental dialogue I had with myself. So stop being my biggest bully, to offer encouraging but grounded affirmations and practical encouragement. And three, just overall making my inner headspace a little bit more conducive for personal growth, financial growth, whatever kind of growth. And I wanted to share this because share the wealth, right? But at the same time, sharing mental health wisdom is very tricky because you don't know what message to deliver, how to deliver it, who to even give it to, especially unsolicited. And also, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a healer. I'm not any of these things. I found it inappropriate, ultimately, to just throw the things that I was learning out onto my friends and family, whoever. But at the same time, while I'm on this mental health journey, I have discovered the festival and rave scene, and I am witnessing all of these fun, crazy, quirky people pulling together all these incredible pieces of art or performances together that all have very special, either spiritual or personal meanings. And I am just kind of subconsciously absorbing all of this and becoming inspired by it. And after like 3 solid years of just consuming this world and enjoying it, eventually I got to the point where I wanted to become a part of the shared experience of a festival or a rave or whatever. And it was sometime before going to Element 11, which is a Utah regional festival, where I realized these two things could come together. And I decided I was going to develop a little prototype piece of performance art where I was going to guide people towards creating a very personal, very important personal affirmation, and hopefully give them another tool on their own mental health journey towards a better, more stable, more secure and confident version of themselves. And this was scary because I've never done anything like performance art before. I'm usually behind the camera, not in front of it. This is a zone kind of experiment. I'm also not much of a performer. I do spin poi, but very amateurish, not a great dancer, all this stuff. I'm not used to being flexing my stage presence, of which I don't have very much. So the idea of doing performance art was intimidating, and at the same time, trying to take myself seriously as a performance artist was also really difficult because there is a voice in my head that is like, what the hell do you know about living life, Brendan? Who are you to think that you have useful advice to give to other people? But it was that voice specifically, which is why I decided to do it, because it was like, no, you're just trying to protect me from embarrassing myself, but to be cringe is to be free, and I must be free. So I decide I'm going to develop a performance art piece, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to bring it to E11, maybe other festivals, and see what happens. And I am so glad that I did this, because I think it has become one of the most important things I've ever done, both for myself and for, I guess, the public at large, we'll say. And I'm going to tell you why. So I'm going to walk you through what my performance art piece looked like, and then the moment where somebody sat down and engaged with it, and they had such an incredible reaction to it that I could not help but feel like I was, in that moment, becoming an artist. So it's such an incredible and powerful moment for me, and I don't think I'll ever forget it. So my performance art piece, I identify a empty area of what's called the playa, which is just kind of like a desert part of the festival where there's not a lot of other activity going on. A lot more quiet, a lot more peace to be found here than the cacophony and noise and laser beams and all that stuff going on. And I've got basically just my regular festival fit on, a poncho, some heavier linen pants, and my hat, my visor, but also I've got a mask on, which is covering my face. And I'm also spinning my LED poi to what I'm going to call sad boy trance. I don't know if there's a name for this, but just down-tempo, emotional electronic music that, for me, always gets me in a thoughtful, introspective headspace. Maybe not for everybody, but my experiment was successful, so I think it worked on other people too. So I'm spinning my poi in front of a seat cushion, which is just empty, sitting on the ground. And in front of that seat cushion is a sign which has a little LED strip on the bottom that's shooting up into like an acrylic sheet that I've written a message on that I can slide out and put different messages into that little illuminated strip, essentially making a whole bunch of different illuminated signs. But the first one says, "Please sit here if you carry a wounded heart." And that's it until somebody sits down. And it wasn't until the third person who sat down and engaged with it that I realized I was really onto something here. And this third opportunity to do this performance art was so powerful. I think it maybe was more validating for me than it was for them who sat down and experienced it. But in any case, this woman, maybe late 30s, early 40s, comes in from the darkness and chaos of the festival and sits down on my little seat cushion. And at this point, the performance art really begins. So I stop spinning my poi, music is still going, and I remove that first sign and put in the second one. And that second one tells them what my name is and asks them what their name is. And all this is designed to do is to communicate that I'm not going to be speaking orally. I'll only be communicating with these LED signs, and also to kind of set the tone for what this experience is going to be. So a little bit more somber, a little bit more down-tempo, a little bit more introspective. And she seems to get it straight away. She, says, "Hi, Raven," which is the nickname I gave myself. And she gives me her name. And from there, I put in another little sign that asks her where this wound came from. Did it come from herself, or did it come from the world? Just for the sake of her own privacy, I won't get into too much of the specifics, but more or less, this experience is just a series of guided questions about this thought that's ruminating in their mind. And eventually, they get to a question that says, "If heard now, what are some words that might heal this injury of yours?" Something to that effect. And she waits maybe a minute to respond, but eventually she does, and she says, "Let go." And I pull in the next sign, then hand her a mirror, and I replace the message with another one that says, "Repeat your previous answer, but address yourself using the hand mirror." So basically, vocalize through the hand mirror to yourself these healing words. And she starts to cry at this point. And it was at that moment I think she realized what this performance art piece was all about, what it was doing, that it was guiding her towards this positive affirmation. It was honestly so touching and tender, but she took the hand mirror and she said it again, and she offered it a few more encouraging words at that moment. She's really touched by it. It was so apparent that it was really important that she said that for herself and to herself. And at that point, I'm concluding the performance art piece. I put in a few more slides, and I end this little, we'll call it a ceremony, I guess, by giving her a keychain-sized mirror along with a message of you can reuse this affirmation anytime, anywhere. And this little keychain mirror is going to help you do that whenever you need. She loved it, and she gave me a great big old hug. She met up with her boyfriend or husband or whatever, and they left and off to enjoy the rest of the festival. And I thought that was the end, but it was not, because The next day, it is like 5 o'clock. It is absolutely roasting at Stargazer Ranch. It is ridiculously hot outside, and my little campsite is tiny. It is so. Maybe I'll throw up a picture of it. It's pretty pathetic. It worked, but man, is it not impressive. And I think I'm on the hunt for water or something. I have water, but I'm looking for ice water, something chilly. And while I'm walking around, I see the woman from last night, and she's got a giant canvas that she's holding over her head as like a sun shield. And she sees me, and she yells out to me, Raven, and runs over and catches up with me. And she proceeds to give me, on the spot, this giant, like 24 by 18 painting that she painted last night right after she sat with me. And it was this incredible, beautiful, symbolic version of herself letting go of all of that, we'll call it bad energy, that she'd been holding on to. And this was so not just incredible because here she was giving me a piece of art that she made that was for me specifically, but it was also the moment that I realized that I was really capable of creating art that could touch people in a very profound, emotional way. Because I've been a photo and video guy for years and years, and I like to make people laugh, and sometimes I get laughs out of my content. We love that. But this was the first time that an artistic expression of mine touched somebody on a little bit more of a deeper, purposeful level. And of course I accepted it, and ended up being invited to their camp and hanging out with some of their other friends and family that were there. And the whole thing was just amazing. Actually, her boyfriend was like, dude, you kind of ruined my night, because we had a bunch of other things planned. But after that experience, she just had to come home and paint. And that was just a funny remark. But all that to say, it was so important for both of us, I think. And it just totally validated my little creative vision for this. And I ended up bringing it to another festival, Burning Man, later that year. And I didn't get a giant painting that time, but I still got that real tender sentimentality that I was really hoping for. More people showed up and were not everybody was moved to tears, but more than I was expecting. Fast forward to this year, I am thinking about that project. The festival season is returning, and I decide I want to apply for an art grant for Element 11 to try and make this experience maybe even more special. And I'm thinking maybe instead of just having everything I need inside a tiny little rucksack that I can stuff on my pack and I can cycle away, what if I have a more permanent installation out on the desert? And I also wondered if there was something a little bit more powerful that I could give them instead of the keychain, which I like the keychain, but they're a little cheap, they're a little dinky. I thought they were just polished stainless steel, which they are, but the inside is just a mirror that has really been cheaply glued into the middle, and it falls out sometimes. A little bit disappointing. But I don't know how much I want to spoil as far as what this experience is going to be, but all that to say, it was going to cost me a lot more money than my previous version. And I decide, you know what? I'm going to go for the art grant. Never gotten an art grant before for anything like this. I'm sure I'll get rejected because there's all kinds of cool art pieces out there, and I don't know if these event organizers are really going to see a performance art piece that's only supposed to be experienced by one or two people at a time. I just, as an event organizer, I don't think I would be pretty drawn to that either. But for some reason, they saw the art grant application and they liked it and they approved it. And I just got the good news relatively recently. And like I said at the beginning of this video, that fucking terrified me and terrifies me right now. Because before, it was just a little thing I was working on. There was no pressure for it to succeed or fail. If it sucked, I could just vanish and it would be nobody's problem. But now it's going to be a little bit more involved. I'm pretty sure it may even be on the little festival flyer that they make every year. I'm not sure how it's going to work. But all that to say, there is the burden of expectation now placed upon me. But this is a good sign. The things that I've been mostly working on in therapy is improving this mental dialogue with myself, but also leaning into the things that I'm afraid of. My move to Ireland in 2022 was my attempt to lean into fear. It was one of the best things I could have possibly done for myself. And a very similar fear sits in my chest when I think about this, but the reason that this fear is actually a really good sign is it means that I'm probably doing something worthwhile. I am probably doing something that is pushing my boundaries, pushing my sense of comfortable self, and win or lose, this experience will make me a more well-rounded, more experienced human being. And I have to embrace that, even though there's some anxiety and hesitation, and even if there was this sort of wishful thinking that I would just not get the art grant and I wouldn't have to try and all this stuff. I wouldn't have to potentially experience the burden of failure. And so this fear that I'm experiencing right now, it's telling me that this is probably really good for me. My fear is just trying to prevent me from embarrassing myself. But if fear has been one of my major obstacles for most of my life, then I think listening to fear, but then doing it anyway, I think is probably going to be incredibly good for me. So the 2 points in making this video, one, just to take a moment and celebrate this little win, because I've been historically so bad at stopping and really just congratulating myself on my perceived successes or accomplishments. I've been very bad at it. So this is my attempt to work on that and allow myself to stop and smell the roses for a second and be proud of myself. And the second point for this video is just to say that fear, not only is fear this survival mechanism, right, that's looking out for you, fear can also be an incredible metric to gauge the value of what you're doing. Fear can be a signal that something that you're thinking about doing or something that you're maybe planning to do but have anxiety about is probably really worthwhile to do, actually. We grow as people when we expand our safe boundary and we push ourselves into doing things that aren't very comfortable or routine. And looking out for fear and noticing where it pops up in our lives can be an incredible way to sort of determine what kind of mental health work you need to be doing. If, for example, if you experience a lot of fear in relationships, you know, if you want to live a more full version of you, then it's probably a good indicator that you might need to lean into relationships more and experiment with trust, or rather opening up one's sense of trust to other people. I don't know, there's countless examples. All that to say, fear doesn't have to be all bad. You know, it can be a very important, powerful piece of information, and if you utilize it correctly, I think it can help you along your mental health journey. It is not something to grow in spite of. I think it can be very much a foil itself for growing and improving as a person. But anyway, that's it for this video. I think I maybe will start a mini development series as I pull together various aspects of this project. I'm kind of torn on how much I want to share and how much I'd like to be a surprise, but only I have 100 subscribers, so it's not like I'm going to be spoiling it for a lot of people. We will see. But I think it might be fun to at least document a little bit of my thought processes and getting various supplies together. So, you know, if you are interested in that, do let me know. But I think that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you all have a tremendous whatever day of the week it is. I'm out.